Hello, everyone. We'll get started in just 1 minute while I get my documents up and let a few people in first. All right, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on how to reduce stress for students and also an asterisk and for parents as well. Uh, the tips I'm about to recommend isn't actually just for the students itself. It could be for the parents. You might find this useful actually for yourselves. And also, this might give you a better understanding about how to support your child. So what we're going to be covering through today is one, understanding a bit stress, just having a better like biological understanding of it and how to make sense of it. Next is like practical strategies on how to reduce stress. And then lastly, building a personalized stress reduction plan. Because even though you might learn all these techniques, what's more important is about how you apply it. So to get us started, as always, share your high school graduation in the chat. We'd love to be able to see what is it that folks are coming from. And also would love to be able to understand like what stresses you out right now. So if you don't mind sharing, share your high school graduation year and also what stresses you out right now. Okay. So drop that in there. And also, if you have any questions throughout this entire time, put it in the Q&A, and then I'll be able to answer it towards the very end. And then also, replay and notes will be available within 48 hours. So quick kind of introduction. If you haven't met me already, I'm Coach Victor with College Admission Secrets and Eagle Lock. I know we're still getting used to that new name of ours. Essentially, I used to work at the admissions office at UC Berkeley. That's actually where I met Coach Tony. I actually was one of the people that introduced him to college admissions like way back in the day. We used to travel different high schools and present about college admissions and how to strategize for that. And more importantly, at least for this particular topic, it dealt a lot with like how do you support students to be able to be successful and be ready for the whole college admissions process. And we know that the college admissions process is super stressful. And so what's really important, right, is like how do you maintain yourself? How do you maintain composure? And also how do you not let it affect your performance, right? Uh, there's at times where we think about we have a sense of capacity, right, in terms of capacity of what we can do. But in reality, what we want to understand is how do you raise your capacity? How do you expand your capacity to take on more? That's why during our coaching sessions, if you're part of our coaching families, is that we always try to push you to do more. And I know it sounds like a little bit stressful to think about all these APs, all these kind of particular dual enrollment courses, but you do have the ability to do it. It's just a matter of how do you actually manage your time? How do you manage your stress? And how do you be successful in that whole entire process? So we're going to teach you about those type of skills within this particular webinar. So I'm actually going to try out this kind of new feature. And sorry, my cat is like actually jumping on my keyboard. I'm going to try out this new feature here where I'm actually going to have the AI to actually type for me. So that way I can not have to focus on two things at once. So let's go to voice typing. Okay, so let's start off with what is, let's do this. Okay, all right, let's start off with what is stress, okay? When it comes to stress, there's actually two types. Oh, there's two types of stress, right? There's the good stress and the bad stress. And what do you mean by good stress, right? Well, the thing is, stress isn't always a bad thing. I think we tend to villainize it when in reality, there's just a certain level of stress that we can be able to handle. So think of it this way, is that a little bit of stress is always healthy. This is actually called eustress. Eustress is actually something that helps motivate us, something that helps us like become motivated and determined to accomplish something. And that actually helps us become like better people or better at our particular job or role or as a student. And then there's also bad stress. In bad stress, what this is like distress. When there's too much that you can't handle, you don't know how to handle it. And that can cause you to become unmotivated because you're so overwhelmed. And also, it feels like it's something that's unbearable. So, for many cases, right, this is where people tend to have the fight or flight response or even freeze response as well. So, if you ever notice yourself like either like fighting the situation or trying or being very angry at it or trying to run away from it and procrastinate. Or if you freeze, you just like kind of sit still in like one area and you're not really able to comprehend what's going on. Those are particular signs that you're doing too much stress, and that is the distress that you're experiencing. So really, it's not about how do you, even though it's kind of the topic of how to reduce stress, but it's about how you react to stress. Okay. And I'm gonna type this right here in ways that I think this is really important because when it comes to stress, stress is like it's like a feeling, right? Like I'm feeling stressed, right? That's a typical response that we hear from students and from many people. And in reality, right, what stress comes from is your thoughts. Your thoughts impact your feelings, which impacts your actions, which impacts your results. Okay, this is an important concept because not many people realize that yes, it's important to validate your feelings, but also a question comes before that is what are the things that was going through your head that made you feel that way, right? So for example, okay, let me go into example. So for example, let's say you have a test coming up, right? And you can feel stressed about it if you're to think in your head, like, oh my God, I did not study for this test, right? The thought of I didn't study for this test is what causes your feeling to be stressed. But let's rework that. What if you're to change your thoughts to, oh, I need to practice for this test to do well on this exam, right? In that kind of reframing, that helps you like focus on your inputs or your actions that you can do to help you feel more prepared. If you want to feel prepared as opposed to feeling like stressed, then you want to focus on the thoughts on what is making you feel prepared. So again, this part is really important here in terms of the thoughts, feelings, action, and results. And this is actually backed up in like science and therapy as well. If you didn't know, this is actually cognitive behavioral therapy. And the whole point of cognitive behavioral therapy, right, is to be able to understand what are the underlying feelings and what are the underlying thoughts. And if you can change the thoughts that go behind the feelings, then that will impact your actions and results, right? That's why people who tend to uh, feel very proud or feel like very motivated, typically, they tend to exemplify really great results in school and exams and everything of that sort because they're always feeling accomplished, okay? When you're feeling accomplished, that motivates you to do more. But let's just assume, like, what if you're kind of feeling defeated or like you don't feel like you are doing your best? Then that leads to actions that result to low results, and that kind of creates a spiral. So for students out there, right, if you're listening, what are the thoughts that you are trying to manage right now, right? And how are those thoughts impacting your feelings? And then if you're a parent, something to consider is how are you talking to your kids? And how does that impact what your kids are thinking, right? Because there is a really good example of how, and I should record this too. There is a really good example about how if you tell a child, wow, you are very smart, right? Uh, by saying that you are very smart, what that means is that you're complimenting their intelligence. And in ways, what that means is that that actually tends to make students go for the easy way out, meaning that if they ever encounter a hard subject or a hard obstacle, they might typically give up because they feel like they're not smart. It doesn't reinforce their identity as a smart person. But if you tell a student or a child, I really appreciate how you are so hardworking, right? That creates a huge difference because what that means is that you're appreciating their effort. You're appreciating what they're doing at a given moment. So by trying to change the words of how you talk to your child or how you even talk to yourself, okay? Because remember, this is also a good practice for yourself. What are you telling about yourself in terms of your identity? And are you identifying as someone that's like very smart or very hardworking? And you could be both as well, right? But just know by the ways that you are self-describing yourself, that impacts the way that your actions come out. Okay. I know this is like really high level thoughts, but these are actually the things that you learn in college. So if you're able to follow with me so far, great job. That means that you are totally prepared and ready to go into higher education. So let's go into the next topic. Okay, recognizing common stress triggers. Okay, so this is really important. This is very similar to the thoughts right here, right? What are the thoughts that go in your head? But also know what is the environment that you are placing yourself in that causes that stress. Okay, so for example, Think of like a box, okay? A box is like your environment. I wish I had a box here. Let's pretend this is a box, right? And within this box, this is your environment right here, and you are inside of it. What's important for yourself is to understand what in your environment is currently causing you stress. Is it the academic workload that you have? Are you taking on too much? Is there social peer pressure? Are there family expectations? Or are you worried about the uncertainty about your future, whether that's about your college and career? What's really important is that you want to understand what kind of system that you're in and how it's triggering you to create stress. And so what you want to do is not necessarily how to navigate through the stress, but how do you create a better environment that's conducive to your own way of working. So let's just say that you don't work well in group environments, right? Because group environments can be a bit stressful because there's too much noise, there's too much talking, and you need time to think for yourself. Well, if you're able to be aware of that stress trigger, then what that means is you're one step ahead because you're being self-aware. By becoming self-aware, you can understand what you need to do to modify your environment to reduce the amount of stress that will be impacting you, right? So if you can identify what factors in your environment, and let's say you're a parent too. If you notice that your child is stressed, then something to consider is what kind of environment do they come home to every night? Okay. Right when they walk into to the door, what is the words that we greet them with? What is it that we're telling them? And also when they go into their room or go to wherever they study, what kind of environment is that like for them? Because in most cases, right, and I say this like treat it with a grain of salt, but a lot of students sometimes are only going through school just because they want to like make their parents proud. And in ways, their motivation might not be coming from themselves, but it might be coming from you as a parent. And so something to consider is what are you telling them or what are they hearing that influences their thoughts, which influences their feelings, and then influences their actions and results. Okay. So let's go on to this next topic here of signs of stress, physical, emotional, and behavioral. So some common signs, if you didn't know that you're feeling stressed, is headaches, fatigue, sleep disturbance, things that that be a little bit challenging, and that it kind of hurts in some type of way. Oh, I just noticed that this isn't working all of a sudden. Okay, is it working now? Okay, now it's working. Okay, so some physical signs of stress are like headaches, fatigue, sleep disturbances. Something to think about is like, are you feeling well rested each night? Are you able to wake up feeling motivated and feeling more energy? Um, do you find yourself like dozing off or something of that sort? If you're not feeling like yourself, that's probably a sign of stress. In terms of emotional stress, right? Are you finding yourself irritable, like as in things like kind of trigger you and that you notice that you get mad pretty often? Are you feeling anxious? And also, do you have like a lack of motivation? Also, behavioral. So, for example, like, are you procrastinating? Are you using some unhealthy coping mechanism? So, for example, do you find yourself binge eating or binge playing games or something that makes you like feel like you're not yourself? Okay. Something to consider when it comes to really understanding whether if you're in a good mental state is to there's two kinds of signs here that I like to always put up. There's a concept called psychological time and your physical time. Your psychological time is what's inside your head. Okay. This is like where your head is currently at. I should start. There's also physical time. Physical time is like the actual time of the day. So for example, right now it's 6:14 p.m. Pacific. That is the physical time. Your psychological time ideally should be in the present no matter what. Like you should be focused on this presentation. You should be focused on this particular uh like Zoom meeting that you're in. And if you find yourself in the future, like your psychological time is in the future or in the past, that's what actually causes stress as well. And actually, when your psychological time is in the future, that actually causes anxiety. And that is like signs of like, oh, you're thinking about a test, you're thinking about college admissions, you're thinking about graduation, you're thinking about all these things that aren't even here yet, right? That is those thoughts when you say those things in your head, like, oh no, like I have to study for this test, or I really hope I get into this particular school. You're stressing yourself out because you're thinking way too far ahead into the future. And in ways, you're trying to predict something that you don't even know will actually happen. And so your mind will create all these kind of illusions about uh, like what's possible. And then this is where your mind starts playing these mind games. And if you think too much about in the past, let's say like your psychological mind is thinking like way back in the day when uh, you were a kid, things were nice, less stressful, or you regret something, or uh, are reminiscing about something and really enjoying that moment when you were there. That actually is what is a factor that causes depression. And so, in ways, right, if your psychological time and your physical time is not lined up, then that means that it will cause more stress in some type of anxious or depressive state. And so that's why it's really important to always keep mindful of the present, try to be as present as possible. And that's what it means. And like whenever you hear about mindfulness, mindfulness is the act of being as present as possible between your psychological and your physical time. And that's going to help you reduce the amount of stress that you experience. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next topic. Kind of curious. This is getting a little bit like psychology way or like meta. Are folks enjoying this kind of content? Let me know what you think because I'm kind of curious too. Like, is this like the type of content that y'all love to hear? All right, got some thumbs up there. Okay. All right, let's talk about some practical ways to reduce stress. Okay. First is the prioritization and organization. And the way I'm gonna kind of map this out is actually imagine that there is a y-axis here, which is like, um, I believe it's importance, okay? And let's do the x-axis, right, is the urgency. So I know it's kind of hard to draw a graph, but y'all get what I mean in terms of being able to imagine that there's like some type of graph and then the y-axis importance, x-axis urgency. And actually the thing what this is called is the Eisenhower Matrix. And actually, let me just Google this because it's probably the most easiest way to kind of say my point. Okay. So the Eisenhower Matrix, what it means is that it's really being able to help you prioritize your time. Okay. One of the things about prioritization, and the most important thing about prioritization, and let's focus on this one. About prioritization is that it's really about the ability to say no to as many things as possible. Okay. The whole point of this Eisenhower matrix is to help you understand like how to prioritize your limited amount of time. I mean, there's only so many hours after school and after work that you can really dedicate towards your goals, right? And so you have to think about what are all the different tasks I have to do and put it into the axis of what's urgent or not urgent, and also what's important versus not important. Because for things that are important and urgent, that goes in this top left quadrant. You want to do it, right? Those are the things that you need to focus your time on. And it's important to ask yourself, right? First, before you even do this, is what are your goals, right? What are you trying to achieve? Because is your goal trying to get an A on this test? Is your goal to be able to get into this particular school? Like you have to understand about why you're even doing this thing to begin with. And then for things that are not important, right? You either want to decide to either delegate or to delete it, meaning like don't do it at all. And when it comes to delegation, I mean, if you're a student, possibly you can't really delegate it. But one of the things that you could consider for delegation is like, how can you automate it, right? For example, maybe you have a lot of tasks on your Google Calendar. If I'm not sure if students are using Google Calendar, but let's assume that you wanted to do some administrative like things for your calendar. It's possible that it's not necessarily important, but you still want to do it, that you could possibly just automate it through delegation. And the last bit is that for things that are not urgent and important, those are the things that you would have to decide whether is it really worth it or not about to do it or not. So that kind of Eisenhower matrix can help you be able to make decisions faster in a more like kind of framework way. All right, let's go. Next part is effective study habits. Okay, so for effective study habits, I want to kind of take into the analogy again of your environment, okay? So your environment is supposed to help you do things easier and also make the things that you don't want to do harder, okay? Essentially, you want to make it as frictionless as possible to study by easily doing like, for example, putting a book open on your desk, right? Ensuring that you have all your materials already prepped for you that you have like a certain time and environment that you're going to be dedicated towards studying. The most important thing about an environment, right? By setting up this environment, and again, this imagine this candle right here is your environment, right? You want to access this environment at the same time every single day, so that when you come into this environment, you already automatically know that you need to study. The thing about a habit, right? Remember, a habit is something that you don't even have to think about. And it's that action that you do every single time that you are in that particular environment. So, for example, when you go to the restroom, you're probably thinking, I need to brush my teeth or I need to use the restroom, right? Your body automatically reacts in some type of way when you see a toilet, right? And also, when you see like a refrigerator, you're likely to get hungry because you're thinking about something to eat because you have a habit of eating when it comes to the refrigerator. The same could be said about the study environment. One of the things that typically stops students all the time from studying or developing good habits is that they are using their study space as a duality, as a dual function. What that means is like maybe you're using that space to play games and also study at the same time. Okay. I know like physically, right, it makes more sense to have it all in one space. But the thing is, if you were to go into your like workspace or your study space and you had the access to games, right? What is the most what's the easiest thing that you would do right in that moment? And it's more than likely that you're probably going to be playing games because it's enjoyable and also it's very easy to just kind of flip into it and just like start playing games. And that's the thing is that you want to make sure you separate them because if you go into the same environment where you're kind of prompted to like relax or chill, then it's going to make you go down that route. So the most important thing for you is to how do you optimize your environment? And by optimizing your environment, that means to make it frictionless, to make it very apparent and visible, and also to make sure you have a specific dedicated time and space for that. All right, let's go to the next part of avoiding procrastination. Okay. Uh, when it comes to avoiding procrastination, generally speaking, like if you are procrastinating, then this is what causes stress to build up, right, over time. Because you have all these different things that you're about to do, and you're trying to save it to the very end. And what's interesting, right, is that sometimes this works for people to do work because that stress is the right amount of stress to get you motivated to actually do it. Okay. And so the thing here is how do you make sure that stress that you're experiencing that is positive, right? It's eustress, the stress that helps you feel motivated to actually do something. How can you make that stressfulness like a little bit earlier, okay, instead of putting it towards the very end? And so, for example, some ways to possibly do this is set deadlines for yourself, right? Or have like accountability buddy where you have to be able to uh, finish certain things at the same time as your accountability buddy. The thing is, we tend to be more accountable if we're promising to a person, especially as someone that we care about, because we don't want to like fail them. Because in ways, we're likely to do something for the sake of others in service, that as like human nature, as opposed to doing it for ourselves. So if you can be able to set certain goals with people, then that's going to be able to help you avoid that procrastination as well. All right. Next thing is mindset and emotional resilience. Okay. Okay, so when it comes to this, right, there is a concept called fixed mindset versus growth mindset. The fixed mindset is kind of setting particular expectations on yourself and maybe others too. Especially if you're a parent, right? Something to check for. Do you have a fixed mindset about your kid? So, for example, my kid will never like doing this. My kid isn't good at math. Uh, I'm not good at math. I'm not good at English. I will fail this particular test, right? Those are all fixed mindsets kind of examples where we say certain thoughts in our mind that set a precedent on what we expect on the results to be. Okay. And the thing is that this hurts us a lot more than we realize. Remember, your thoughts impact your feelings, impact your actions, which impacts your results. And so if you already have thoughts that you're already going to fail, well, guess what? That's going to make you first feel like as if, I don't know, crummy about yourself or unworthy or something negative. And that's going to impact your actions of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's really important to understand, is it that your mind is playing tricks on you, or is it like also telling you things that you shouldn't believe in? Okay. One of the most liberating and most powerful things that you can do is to actually separate yourself from your ego. Okay, and now this is going to get a little bit more philosophical or more psychology meaning. Okay, what I mean by this is that your ego, right, is imagine it as like a thing right here. And it's telling you certain thoughts in your head. It's like saying like, "Oh, I'm not so good at this. I am not good enough," or anything negative thoughts. Like that's what your ego is telling you. And in fact, your ego is probably the one that also gets jealous, gets mad, gets like prideful. It's probably the things that that's why we always say like don't let your ego take over you, right? Because your ego is actually separate from you. And what I mean by that is your sense of self doesn't always have to be with your ego. Okay, and let me rewind. I know that was probably a lot of confusing for a lot of people. So when it comes to your ego, right? Your ego is a kind of think of it as like something separate from yourself and your identity, and it's something that is telling you certain things that you don't necessarily have to believe in. Yourself, your sense of self can be like just your physical body and your like kind of sense of being. And if you can separate your ego's thoughts from yourself and not identify with your ego, then you already kind of experience what's called what is it called? Uh they do in like spirituality. Was it? I'm tripping up on the word. But it's like essentially you're able to achieve some type of mindfulness where things don't affect you anymore. Okay. And that is a state where not a lot of people can get to. And in fact, it's a lot harder, easier said than done, right? And and so that's a kind of a practice that you have to consider doing is, are these thoughts that I have in my head, is it something that I should be listening to? Okay, so we talked about fixed mindset. Next part is the growth mindset. Growth mindset is the belief that you can be able to achieve anything. And that's just through like by being able to know that by putting in your hard work or your effort, that you could be able to learn it. Sure, like you might not necessarily know calculus yet, but you can if you take the right steps of the way, right? Sure, you might not be good at sports, but if you just learned how to play like the foundations of the sport, learn how to, handle a basketball, learn how to shoot like small step at a time, you'll be able to get there. And so think of this for any other kind of activity or things that cause you stress. How are you having a growth mindset about that particular activity or subject? Meaning, in other words, um, how can you recalibrate your thoughts and your brain or your ego to believe in yourself that you could be able to solve or learn that particular thing? And if you can attempt to rewire your thoughts to think in that way, then it will help you be much more productive and also help you learn and grow like better. If you have a fixed mindset, typically it makes it really hard for you to learn and receive new information. And so know that with this fixed mindset versus growth mindset, this is a lot of hard work, as in it's not easy to change the thoughts that are wired in your head because we are products of our environment, meaning that it's possible that maybe the way that you were raised or the way that your parents was raised or anything of that sort, these particular thoughts are things that we learn generationally. And so one of the most difficult things that we could do is to be able to try to unlearn the things that we've gained from our own like kind of families and culture, and to be able to change it in a way where we can start believing in ourselves. And that's a growth mindset piece. Okay, that was a little bit of a long tangent there. And so yeah, and then the self-compassion part is really being able to know that this is part of the process. It's part of the learning here. All right, building emotional resilience. Okay. Uh, so when it comes to emotional resilience, right? Uh, we all experience we all experience some type of like what I call a setback. A setback is maybe a challenge, an obstacle, something that has been difficult for us to come back from. Okay. And there's at times where this setback can be very serious and it could be a very challenging experience that takes over our feelings and causes us to be in despair. And just don't get me wrong that feelings are always good to validate. It's always important for yourself to acknowledge what you're feeling and to feel what you need to feel in that moment. But also to consider is that you can always change the framing of how you interpret the situation to be able to not feel as stressed or feel as negative. Okay. So, for example, one of the most powerful things that you can always do is to either find gratitude in something or to like even uh, actually like laugh about it. Okay. And what I mean this is example, like let's imagine that like uh like you close your eyes for like a good like 10 seconds, right? And imagine that if you were closing your eyes, this is how your life was like as in like you are like blind, right? And that this is your new normal in ways, right? When you're able to take that in, let it sink in, and then you open your eyes, you'll start to feel this sense of gratitude that you actually can see, that you can be able to experience the privilege of sight, because there are people who experience blindness and they don't necessarily get that. So that's an example of a framing using gratitude is to appreciate what you're experiencing right now in spite of the situation. So for example, let's say you have a very stressful like academic test, okay, or the subject. Uh, sure, it might be very stressful that you have a F, C, or D in like calculus exam, right? But at least at the very end of it, you can be grateful too that you are able to acquire an education that your parents might not have ever been able to attain. For example, like my parents were refugees from Vietnam, and it's not as if like they were able to experience this education because they had to immigrate as refugees during the time when they were like teenagers, right? In ways like that's a reframing of me being appreciative of my education that I'm receiving because I am pre-framing it in a way where I'm able to compare how the situation matters in the grand scheme of things. Okay. Also, like for example, even just thinking about a C or D on a calculus exam, it's not the end of the world. I mean, you can always make up the grade. And also there are future ways that where you can make it up by taking the class again. If you think about those alternative situations, it helps you understand that this thing, this setback that you're experiencing, is a small fragment of the things that you're going to experience in your life in your entire lifetime. Also, another thing to consider is to reframe it through laughter. And this is actually one of the most interesting things because if you laugh about anything in a dire situation, like that actually like lightens up the whole mood or the whole thing. Like for example, if you like it's like how laughing is considered contagious, right? When you laugh in a room, it's likely that other people will start laughing either with them or maybe laughing at the fact that they have a funny laugh. And when it comes to that, uh, laughter can actually really change easily the way that you experience and feel something. So let's just say if you do experience a hardship or a challenge, if you just laugh about it and find something to laugh about, right? It changes your whole entire impact about how you received and interpreted that situation. So that's just something as another strategy to consider. All right, let's go in the next part, which is healthy lifestyle and self-care. This is a little bit more straightforward, but let's go into it. All right, sleep and nutrition. Is it easy enough to say that this is so important that you need to make sure you have a good amount of sleep? Also, if you didn't know, teenagers tend to have more sleep than they average, like 8 hours. And so it's possible that 9 hours or even 9.5 hours can be something that your body might need. In ways, everyone has their own circadian rhythm. What that means is like we all have our natural tendencies to sleep or wake up and be optimal at certain times of the day. And so something to consider for yourself is what is your circadian rhythm? What are your sleeping habits? And how is it that you're matching your circadian rhythm to your sleeping habits? Technically speaking, right, one of the challenges for high school students is that majority of students at that age tend to be night owls, like as in they tend to sleep very, very late and sleep in until like the morning or afternoon. And that's the unfortunately challenging thing about your school schedule is that you kind of have to adapt to it. But something to consider, right, for the parents is that sometimes we think it's unhealthy, but in reality, it's part of their natural like genetics that this is something temporary that they experience at this particular age. So don't be too harsh if they end up sleeping really late at night. And it could be the case where they're just very productive at nighttime. Okay. So uh it's important to also know like, are you able to create a good sleep environment that you have the highest quality sleep? One of the things when you realize when you're coming of age, parents maybe you can relate to this, is that the more that you care about your quality of sleep, the older you get because you start realizing how important it is to sleep. Sleeping is what gives you the most energy uh, in a given day. Like you can change how much energy that you receive the next morning, and that will change the entire experience of the entire day just by focusing on what time you sleep. Okay. So let me drill that in a little bit deeper. Is that the one thing that you can control about your sleep that is the most highest leverage and low effort possible is to change the time that you actually get ready for bed, because that will determine about how much energy you have the next day. So if you find yourself feeling really sleepy and also you end up taking naps a lot at school, then that possibly means that you need to go to bed earlier. All right. Next part is exercise and mindfulness. All right. So when it comes to exercise and mindfulness, really what it is here is generally speaking, just be active, cardio, lifting weights, strength training, something, okay? Because we all know that exercise is a fundamental part of what keeps us living longer. They even say like how exercise and nutrition tends to be uh the the most effective way to live longer. And there's a lot of means to that because if you have healthy exercise and nutritional habits, then you could be able to live a longer life and have more flexibility to try different things like going hiking, going through different types of physical exercises that are typically more harsh for other people who don't exercise or eat nutritionally. Okay. Something to consider too for I skipped the nutrition part, but nutrition is extremely important where hopefully you're not eating junk food all the time because junk food does cause sluggishness. Okay. If you're eating a lot of sugar and also eating a lot of like unhealthy fats, such as like potato chips all the time, and also if you're drinking like a monster drink or like some type of energy drink, not a lot of people do this enough. And especially, I wish someone taught me this when I was back in high school, which is look at the nutrition label, look at how many grams of sugar there is, because the amount of sugar that it has, that can dramatically impact your amount of energy in a given day. And that energy will affect your stress levels. Okay. So if you eat healthy and you exercise routinely, you're able to take care of your physical body, which in turn affects your mental state because your mental state is a result of everything that you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And the way that you experience life is through your physical health, right? Because let's just say that you're feeling physically unhealthy. It's hard for you to go up the staircase. It's hard for you to like do simple type of task. You don't want to get into that place because that at that point, that's where it starts leading into negative thoughts, which leads to depression, which leads to a lot of more like spiraling. So make sure that you're taking care of your physical body in order to take care of your mental well-being. All right. And digital detox. It I'm not sure if folks understand this or know this, but the rates of depression and anxiety have gone up since social media. Uh, like there's like a direct correlation to that, and it's unfortunate because a majority of social media users are teenagers. Okay. And the thing about social media is that it causes us to have a sense of peer pressure where we feel like we have to be a certain type of way or a fit in a particular like tribe. And what I mean by that is that we're always trying to look for self-validation. As teenagers, one of the things that teenagers tend to do is they seek out attention. And I know if you're a teenager and you're hearing this, it's kind of weird to kind of hear that. but it's partially true where like we're always constantly seeking for validation where we feel like we can belong somewhere because we are in the process of discovering our own identity, discovering what we like, discovering what we want to do with our lives in ways we're trying to constantly uh, find communities where we feel like we belong. Okay. And that's why in high school, you typically gravitate towards a club or you gravitate towards a group of, or a clique or a group of people where you feel like you get along with them the most well because they reinforce your identity and who you are. So, what this means is that when it comes to social media and you're using a lot of your mobile phone and games and such like that, it kind of I don't know. I would say it makes you question a lot about whether if you're competent enough, if you are uh, meeting the same kind of expectation that's expected from that tribe, if you are actually meeting the standards that you want to get to. Because the worst kind of case that you want to be in is that you compare yourself to others. If you find yourself looking at social media, and if you're looking at a particular like profile or looking at a particular image, and you think about yourself in that moment, that probably means that you're likely comparing yourself to that person. And that's where it gets unhealthy because, in ways, you can never be the same as somebody else. You should always just be competing with yourself in the past. And what I mean by that is just try to focus on being a better version of yourself than yesterday. And that's enough. You don't necessarily need to try to be a better person than who you see online. Okay. All right. Did you All right, so let's talk about stress reduction plan. Here, I'm just going to kind of summarize real briefly, which is uh, it's really important to understand again, what are your stressors? What's the environment that's causing you stress? Again, if you're a parent, what is in your environment of your child and what's causing them stress? So uh, the kind of framework that I kind of talked about here was your thoughts impact your feelings, which impacts your actions, which impact your results. What is the stressors or what are the particular environmental cues that are causing the thoughts to be negative or stressful in the first place? Okay. And then remember, there's a healthy amount of stress and there is an unhealthy amount of stress. The importance here is how do you minimally maintain a low level of stress that you can handle and to be able to make sure that you create an environment where you can like healthily respond to stressors. The next part right here is to identify what are your strategies to implement to be able to make sure that you reduce the amount of stress. In ways, right, you can develop a better, remember, a better environment where you are able to develop better study habits and be able to make sure that you are set up optimally to respond to any type of stressful situation. Remember, the most important thing is focus on your environment. How can you make your environment as productive as possible and also that doesn't lead to high levels of stress? If you can control your environment, you can create better habits and you can create better actions and results based off of by placing yourself in that environment. Something goes to show too is that also to consider for your for students, who are your friends in this case, right? Are your friends also count as part of your environment as well? And are they contributing or not contributing to your stressful environment? Okay. A lot of things that people don't realize is that a lot of your friends that you have right now, it's likely that they're not always going to be your friends in the future, unfortunately. Maybe you'll be best friends forever, hopefully. But remember that your environment is a product of not just physical things or objects, but it's the people in your environment. So control who are the people in your environment so that way you can reduce the amount of stress. Something to consider if you're a parent, are you adding stress to your child? Okay. I know that is something that a lot of parents have talked to me about, that they're scared about being that person that stresses out their kid. And just so you know, you're not alone. There's a lot of parents who have experienced this too and have actually talked to me about this. And in ways, uh, the goal isn't necessarily to like not stress them out, but the goal is like, how do you help them manage their stress? How do you create a supportive environment where they can address the amount of stress, the healthy levels of stress? So again, to kind of going from the fixed mindset to the growth mindset. Uh, be intentional about the things that you're telling them, appreciate their hard work that they're contributing towards it, and focus on the accomplishments that they've made to get to this point, because that is a part of that motivation factor there. One of the concepts that I used to work at the school district over at San Francisco Unified School District. And one of the concepts that we always said to all the adults is that you always want to be a warm demander. A warm demander is someone who is compassionate, but still has high expectations on the kids. And what that means is you always want to be their cheerleader, and also you want to push them to be the better version of themselves. And so that what that means is I know that you can handle this calculus test. I know that you can do really well in these AP courses. I know that you can do really well in all of these particular subjects because I know how hard that you work. Okay. That is a warm demander example because you are setting high expectations for them. And also at the same time, you are being compassionate in terms of like how you talk to them. Okay. It's not just a matter of, actually, I didn't add the compassion part, but the compassion part is really being able to also be a supportive of them too, and to acknowledge their experiences and what is it they're going through. Okay. I believe we talked about these things here. And lastly, create an action plan. Those are just things. Remember the Eisenhower Matrix to be able to focus on the things that were really important and also really urgent, focusing on the ones that matter. Your time is limited every single day, and to focus on the things that help you bring you closer to your goals. All right. I hope that was helpful for everyone. Now we can go into Q&A. So I wonder, is there any questions out there in terms of like how to handle your stress, or let's see, like any tips or recommendations about any of about these things? While you're putting your questions in the Q&A, something to consider is if you want the notes of the replay, please text 949-298-6234 notes or replay so that you can get either the notes that I transcribed here or the replay itself. Also text the same number for coach if you are not a coaching family yet and you're not part of our program, so that you can get a free 15-minute coaching session on the college admissions process. Okay. And if you want to text Victor, right, then you can be able to try to get that 15-minute coaching session with me as well. Okay. All right. Any questions? Not hearing anything or seeing anything. All right, everyone. I hope this was a very valuable session to you and your child, or if you are the student as well. School is stressful, right? School can be very difficult, but again, it's about how you pre-frame your thoughts into being able to see this as a challenge. Then you could be able to see this as a healthy amount of stress. So feel free to reach out to me on Discord if you're part of our families, if you want to chat more, and we'll talk again. Thank you, everyone. Take care.